Hi there. Here's my little analysis of the debt ceiling. I think that there's no reason whatsoever to have this whole discussion. So there has to be a reason why the banks and the Federal Reserve and everybody else is making this an open conflict. And then you have to wonder why it's such a lengthy conflict, why there's no resolution quickly. It's not to draw the public into one mindset or another, because the public is completely irrelevant. If they had decided to raise the debt ceiling yesterday, it would have happened. Nobody would have been consulted, whatever. Oh, the proposal was fantastic. Oh, the proposal was lousy. Really, it's not had nothing to do with the constituents or the voters. So it's not for re-election purposes at all. And also it's not necessary for the banks or anybody else to go to Congress to ask for money, because we know that $16 trillion have been created out of thin air and handed out to American and international banks by the Federal Reserve, and nobody knew about it until it was dug up in a report. Somebody asked about it, what happened here, and they had to tell. So it's not done for democratic purposes. It's not done for the fact that the money has to be legally created or something. There's no problem with creating money in the U.S. And it's not a 1-2 political maneuver, let's say, as well, because otherwise it would already have been decided. So if you do a little piece of theater, you try to keep it entertaining, and then when everybody is watching, you do the final act, and that's your piece of theater. Then by now people are getting bored with it, or frustrated, or disinterested. So what's happening here? I think what's happening here is that you have a breakup between the contract holders and the contract enforcers. This may be a way to express it. You have had the case of Iceland, which defaulted on its debt, and nothing happens. So Iceland wasn't occupied by military force. The houses weren't dragged empty. All the stuff wasn't sold. It defaulted, and then it told Holland and other countries that had people's money invested, fuck off. And that was it. Iceland, of course, is an island, but it's easy to dominate. With a few smart mobs, you can make everything happen there. That hasn't happened. I think that's very significant if you think about it. Another example is the many mortgage contracts. People walk away from their houses, or they stop paying their mortgage payments. And okay, once in a while you get people removed from their house for good reasons, bad reasons, etc. But most of them are left where they are, and then there's an excuse made up for why to do that. That's because the book value of the house then is higher and all that stuff. But I think the truth is that it's way too expensive, and there's nobody you can pay enough in order to get everybody out of their houses, because that is something that the banks absolutely need to do in order to secure, for instance, $300,000. So the security detail, the price of those type of actions would quickly rise in the free market. If I tell somebody to, let's say, scratch my nose because my hands are tied, he might do it. But if I tell him, you have to scratch my nose because otherwise I won't get $100,000, he says, maybe you give me a 50% share of your $100,000 and I'll do something for you, otherwise not. So that's the quandary that the banks are in. They're in a big trouble. They have contracts, and if they want to enforce them, they're not the people that can do it. They're weak, relatively weak. Some of them, of course, are highly trained, but they're just individuals in suits. And that's, I think, on a big scale what's happening to the US at the moment. So the banking system wants to go on and move on and do whatever it does, and the military says, listen, we're not going to do this for you anymore. The military-industrial complex will enrich itself, but it will not take care of the rest of industry. So even if you are somebody that says, well, the military-industrial complex does what it wants, the military-industrial complex doesn't need the banking system. It doesn't need it. And it doesn't need any other industry that has nothing to do with the military-industrial complex. The other way around, 100%. Without military, there's no oil, because immediately some other army will move in and secure the oil until you go, you move in with your military and you throw these other guys out again. It's simply something that can be found in different places in the world, and whoever is strong enough will take it. That's real politics, German invention. So that's what's going on for I think. And Obama is on the side of the military. He has to be, otherwise he wouldn't be the president. He's the commander-in-chief. It's not that he's a dictator. And maybe he is a dictator. I could very, it would be news. But next meeting is like Boner on the left side and Reid on the other side. And Obama reaches under the table and gets out a shotgun. He says, well, I give you 3 minutes to come up with a plan. And if I don't have it after 3 minutes, I'll shoot one of you. And it's probably the Republican. That type of behavior, if it's so important, let's say if the military simply says, okay, we're not going to govern this country, we have to have a government for that. The government has to take the wise decisions. And there's lots of people there in Washington, so let them do it. But we want to do it according to our rules, according to what we want to enforce. Then that would have to be the case. It should have to be forced. Not with a gun, but eventually. Eventually the Congress would have to start running for the president, which controls the army, and not the other way around. And I think that's the standoff at the moment. The standoff is, will the Congress start running the country? If it won't start running the country in time, there will be a coup, I think. This is a bold prediction, but then there's no other option than that the military takes charge. Because the military ultimately provides everything that the US needs, and not the banks. They just shovel it around and make you feel like you owe them. I think that's enough for one video. Thanks for listening, and I appreciate your comments.